Well, hey Artie, thanks for coming in. It's nice to meet you. Um, you do prefer to go by Artie, right?
Yes,
Perfect. And how old are you?
I am 25.
25. Okay, great. And what brings you in today?
Um, Probably about off and on throughout my whole life. I've kind of just always been really, really anxious. I find it really, really hard to just get out and go do things. It was kind of a challenge to get to this meeting today just because I was so anxious.
Mhm.
And I'm really thankful it was online because that um, allows me to stay home and stay in an environment that I'm comfortable in. But for probably the majority of my life, just off and on, I've really struggled um like turning things in on time because I'm so anxious that they're not like correct. I'm really like I'm in my master's program now. Um and sometimes at work I feel like I'm not doing the best that I could. Even though my boss tells me I do amazing, I think that he's lying to me. Um, I also just really struggle. I'm just so anxious at night that I'm like ruminating my thoughts. And I just feel really worried at night and I can't sleep because I'm just thinking about everything I did that day and like where I went wrong, people's reactions to things, my reactions to things. And it just makes me feel really tense. And just stressed out all the time. And um, I kind of decided to come and get help because it's starting to boil over. I'm starting to like break down a little bit at work, and it's just not very pleasant. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it sounds like you've got a lot that you're dealing with. This anxiety is causing you to ruminate over thoughts. It's causing you to be hypercritical of yourself and avoid doing things in case they're not up to the quality that you've decided they should be. Um, and so that sounds difficult to deal with. Sounds like it's really infecting a lot of parts of your life. Would that sound accurate to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been going on for so long now, that there's just so much that I've missed out on. Like I
Mhm.
never really got to go socialize with people because my anxiety was just like, oh, um, like what if I'm gonna wear the wrong thing? What if I say the wrong thing? And then there's some things that I just get anxious about for no reason. Like just crossing the street, sometimes I get so anxious that I'm gonna get hit by a car even though I have the right of way. So it's not really healthy because I'm just so stressed out all the time from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when would you say this started for you?
I want to say fourth or fifth grade, so I was maybe about 8 or 9, give or take, maybe closer to 6 or 7.
Okay, so this has been a long-standing thing you've had to
Hmm.
deal with throughout your whole life. Okay, and then
Yeah,
how often, like on a day-to-day basis, would you say this comes up for you?
pretty frequently. I think if like in day-to-day terms, I'm anxious at least 2 or 3 times a day,
Mhm.
really, really bad. And then the rest of the day, it's just kind of, I don't want to say like mild anxiety, um, but it's kind of something that just sits with me the rest of the day when it's not like really bad, you know?
Yeah.
Like sometimes I can be really functional and sometimes I like shut my office door, and I just kind of sit by myself for a little bit to calm down.
Okay. So it's pretty prevalent then in your everyday life. So when you're feeling this anxiety, would you say that you tend to feel more restless or on edge? What about fatigued? Do you find that you're more
Oh
tired?
yeah. Oh yeah. I've I've kind of complained to my mom since I was about a senior in high school that I'm just always tired and she always blamed it on the fact that I take naps all the time. But
Mhm.
even I take naps and I don't wake up feeling refreshed. Like I'm just mentally I feel exhausted all the
Right.
time. Like not it's never like I've explained to doctors in the past when I talk about this, it's never like a physical exhaustion. It's always like my head is just foggy. Like it feels like when you take a nap that's like bad and you wake up and you're like kind of ooh, that's just kind of how I feel all the time. And it really sucks.
Yeah, no, that sounds difficult. How much do you sleep typically in a regular night?
Um Not, I don't sleep very well. I sleep really, really off and on. Um, Sometimes I find myself like I'm in bed at midnight, right?
Hmm.
But I don't fall asleep till maybe 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I have to
Okay.
get up at like 8 or 9 to go to work.
Right. Okay. And then when you can throughout the day, you'll take a nap if you're able to.
Yeah,
Um,
and usually that's like it's like 3 hours. So I feel like I'm making up for sleep, but I'm also not, if that makes
right.
sense.
Yeah. Right. Like that's in theory, that's what you're trying to do, but it's not
Right.
always successful. Right. Okay. So when you go to bed at midnight and it takes you like 3 hours to fall asleep, what's happening in that time there? Do you find
Um,
yourself thinking about a lot of things?
Admittedly, I kind of I'm on my phone for like the first 30 minutes or so, just kind of
Okay.
like winding down, and then I'm just awake and I'm kind of thinking over like the day, what I said, like, oh my God, should I have said that? Or um, maybe I came home and I noticed a stain on my shirt that I got at lunch. I'm like, oh my God, how many people saw me with this stain on my shirt? Like, how many people think I'm just a slob? Um, and then I'm just kind of sitting there worrying over all of these little things that happen throughout my day. Um, and it hurts for me to go to, like, not really hurts, it's a struggle for me to get to sleep because I'm just worried so much about that.
Yeah. Okay. And that sounds really difficult. I mean, sleep's a huge part of how we regulate our mood throughout the day, and so any sleep disturbance is always gonna have an effect on us. Do you find when you're feeling more anxious than normal, or do you have difficulty concentrating? Does your mind tend to go blank?
Yeah, I struggle a little bit with like getting work done because of that. Especially like, I mean, I'm in my master's program and we do quizzes and stuff. I find myself like when we're taking a quiz, I will kind of freeze and just kind of stare at the page because I can't pull the information I need out of my head because my mind just shuts off. Because I'm just so anxious about failing this quiz.
Hmm.
And I don't fail them. That's the crazy part is like I usually do fine, but my brain every time is just like, we're gonna fail. Oh my God. And it's a struggle to just stay concentrated and on task because of that.
Okay. What about irritability? Do you notice any of that?
I don't feel like I get very irritable towards people. It's mostly towards myself.
Hmm.
Like I do get a little bit annoyed with people, um, but I never really like act out against them, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
It's all usually just inward.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
Um, I don't self-harm. I just kind of like am really negative towards myself. I call myself stupid and I call myself worthless and I tell myself I'm worrying too much and I'm just ugh. I'm like, you know,
So you feel like you just get more hard on yourself, a little more
yeah.
hypercritical,
And
maybe.
I get irritable because of that.
Okay.
Because I put myself in a bad mood and then I try not to like be around anyone when I'm in a bad mood, which is like I said earlier, I just kind of go and shut myself in a confined space just to be alone.
Okay. So it when you're feeling anxious, first what happens is you tend to beat up on yourself, and then that causes the
Hmm.
irritability.
Yeah.
And um and then when that irritability comes, it's kind of tell me more about that. How do you process that irritability?
I don't feel like I do.
No.
I just kind of like stew on it and just think about how like irrational I'm being and how silly
Hmm.
people will see me for being so like childish.
Right. So you tend to beat yourself up more
Yeah,
over the
yeah,
feelings that you're beating yourself up for.
yeah.
Okay.
It's not a
Um,
good time.
yeah, it's kind of a vicious cycle, sounds like.
Mhm.
What about any muscle tension? Do you feel any tensity in your body when you're feeling particularly anxious?
Yeah, I notice I know and I never noticed it at the time, but I notice like when I come home, my shoulders are always like squared
Hmm.
up and like pent. But when I as soon as I get home, they drop and I'm like fine, but then they're really sore from being pent and tensed up all the time.
Hmm. Okay. Um,
Oh,
and
and I also
then,
clench my jaw a lot. Sorry.
oh,
I
no,
just
you're fine.
remembered. Yeah, and it's caused some really bad like tooth problems because I clench when I
Oh,
get stressed. Yeah, it's not been great.
What tooth problems has that caused for you?
Um, it's this is gonna sound so bad. It's like I've ground my teeth down, like
Oh
because
no.
I
Okay.
clench my teeth, I clench my jaw
Yeah.
so much. But yeah.
And has there been any like have you gone to the dentist and they've pointed that out? What have
Yeah,
they said
they
about that?
suggested I like wear a mouth guard, and that's really annoying because then like
Uh-huh.
I've got something in my mouth and I sound stupid and I'm anxious about that and
And that just adds to it
hmm
all the more. Right. Wow. Um, the teeth grinding's a difficult one. That's
need those.
yeah. Um, so you said that you're working right now. What do you do? What's your occupation?
So I'm currently doing like a graduate assistantship with a office on the campus I attend. Um, and for the past month, I've kind of been taking over the person I'm supposed to be working under's caseload.
Okay.
Because she has had just like a she had an accident and then she had to get surgery for something not related, and then now she's going out of town. So I've kind of like taken over her caseload, and that's kind of what brought me here. Is I've been really anxious about doing things right, and I've been worried about like getting fired and um just overall just anxious and really
Yeah.
yeah, really stressed.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a couple times now this anxiety coming up around work. Is work primarily where you experience it, or are there other places that it comes up?
Yeah, for the most part it's like just work and school stuff. I sometimes get it a little bit in social situations, but not nearly as bad when I'm with people that I know and I'm comfortable with. It's like
Okay.
if we all go out to somewhere new, that's when it starts to affect me in that way, but mostly it's just work and school.
Okay. So what kind of things at work or school might activate some of that more intense anxiety?
Well, like I mentioned, quizzes for sure. I freeze up when I take quizzes. At work, it's when I have to deal with um, kind of more, I don't want to say needy students, but students who require just a little bit more than others. And they're kind of snippy about it. That gives me anxiety because then I have to send it to like my supervisor's boss, who's like my boss, and I freak out a little bit that I'm not handling it well, and he'll think that I'm not, fit for this position and stuff like that. And then interacting with some of my other coworkers that are just a little bit more eccentric, to say
Mm.
nicely, I guess. It's hard to interact with them because I feel like I'm gonna say something wrong and they're gonna get mad at me, and it's just not a I just get really anxious about it.
Yeah. Okay. And have you sought treatment before for your anxiety?
Yes. Yes.
Tell me about that. When and where have you gone?
Um, so I've kind of been in therapy a little bit off and on, I guess, since my senior year of high school, since I was about 17 or 18. That's when I first kind of had my biggest problem with anxiety. I lost my entire friend group at the time. So I saw someone for about a year and a half, and she was like, "Okay, you're cured. Like we can terminate treatment." And then 2 years later, when I was a sophomore in college, I was about 20, I think. I kind of relapsed and I went and saw somebody again up until this past year. So we saw each other for 4 or 5 years, give or take. And we kind of we didn't really officially end. She had to cancel our last appointment and I had aged out of her program. Um, and I've kind of been going this the rest of the year, just kind of cruising along, and I've kind of noticed I probably should get back to seeing someone because I'm forgetting the skills that I kind of learned, and I need just like
Mm.
refreshers for that.
But overall, those um, times you were in therapy, they were helpful for you. They
Yes,
helped
very,
you
very
manage your
helpful. Yeah.
perfect. Great. Great. Well, I'm glad to see you back and taking initiative and doing what you can to build those skills and be able to handle those day-to-day stressors. Do you know of any history of psychiatric diagnoses in your family?
Um, Not in my family, I don't think, no. Um, We're all mostly just kind of depressed and anxious.
Okay. But you don't know if anyone has gotten diagnosed with that. You just kind of
Yeah, we
generally
just kind of, yeah.
see it along among your
Mhm.
family. Do you see it among both your mom's side of the family and your dad's side of the family?
Yeah, I see it really in my mom a lot. My dad kind of hides it a little bit better, but I think
Okay.
he's kind of got anxiety because he's always just kind of worried that the house is a mess, and it's never a mess. It just looks lived in. It's not like terrible, but he's always anxious about that. And then my mom is definitely depressed and
Mhm.
anxious and all of the goodness because she kind of takes it out on us, not in a physical way, but in like a mental and emotional way. And that's caused both my sister and I guess, to develop it as well. My sister, I think, is in the process of being diagnosed, but we don't know yet.
Okay. So tell me more about that family dynamic growing up with the way your mom took things out on you. Tell me more about that.
I think she kind of treated us the way her mom treated her, if I
Okay.
had to take a stab at it. She never really paid attention. Well, she paid more attention to my sister than she did to me, which I think is how she grew up because her mom would pay more attention to her younger brother. Um, and like a lot of the memory I have of my childhood is coming home and trying to tell her about my day, and she'd be nose deep in a book, and then she'd get mad at me for something that I like kind of didn't do, and it was like, did I say something wrong? Am I like annoying her? Is that why she's getting mad at me for something I didn't do? Um, and it just kind of caused a lot of stress. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you were never really even sure what
Yeah.
happened that caused her to be upset with you, and it would you say she was not very attentive to you? You mentioned that she was
Yeah.
constantly with her nose in a book.
Yeah, for sure. She really wasn't all that attentive to me, and it kind of got worse because we kind of grew up in that cusp between like cell phones you couldn't do stuff on and iPads. So once
Hmm.
like iPads started coming out, it got a lot worse. I don't really remember her being there for a lot of my big events. Like it was always just my dad.
Okay.
Um, and I think that really kind of affected me because it was just kind of disappointing,
Hmm.
and not knowing why kind of impacted that too.
Yeah. Tell me more about how that felt when you had a big event and she wasn't there.
Really disappointing, honest
Hmm.
to goodness. I would kind of get anxious that people would wonder, like, why is my mom not there? Like, they know my mom's alive. They know that she exists. So, like, why isn't she coming to my events?
Hmm.
Um, so it was really disappointing and also really like stressful for me because I wanted my mom to be there. Um, and that fear of like people wondering, where's my mom? Like that really got to me a lot. And I
Hmm.
don't really feel like, I could get as much joy out of those events as like I should have because I was
Hmm.
so worried about that stuff.
Yeah. And so during a time like that, was your primary focus on what other people would think about your mom not being there? Or
Yeah,
was
what they
it,
would think about like our family and
uh-huh,
myself and why my mom wasn't there. That's kind of where my focus was.
right, okay. And that pulls you away from the big event that's happening, the thing that you want to be celebrating.
Hmm.
Um, how was your relationship like with your father?
It's really good. I would consider him my best friend. He still comes down to see me because we live only 30 minutes from one another. He still comes
Okay.
down to see me. We sometimes will go like for Costco runs every other weekend, get food. He'll come and just hang out and we'll, shoot the breeze and just vibe. And I feel like he's my best friend. I don't talk to him as much as I do my mom, which is kind of weird.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I feel like we're closer.
Okay. And then are your parents married? Are they
They're
okay?
married. They're still together.
Um, good. Were they married when you were born?
Mhm.
Okay.
Uh,
So,
they, I think they got married while my mom was pregnant with me, which is kind of cool.
oh,
So I
okay.
was kind of there,
Yeah, yeah,
in a sense, kind of there.
yeah.
I was vibing.
You were there, and so they've been married your whole born life, that
Hmm.
is. Um, well, good deal. What about siblings? You mentioned uh one. How many
Mhm.
siblings do you have?
I just have the one younger sister.
Just the one. Okay. And how's your relationship with her?
Not really good. I've kind of felt like she's been the child that they wanted, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like I was just kind of, oops, we had a child. And then they had my sister, and I felt like they were, I guess, I mean, she is a second child, so they were like more prepared for her. Um, but she's a little bit more successful than I am. She got really good scores on her ACT, so she's got a full ride to her college. Um, they got her a car. There's just all this stuff that like I feel like she's just a little bit more taken care of than I am. And that's also not a good feeling.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean sometimes it can just be when we do this comparison, it can be
Mhm.
us just comparing because we compare, and that can be that
Yeah.
anxiety coming through. But you mentioned like that your parents had gotten her a car,
Hmm.
and I assume they didn't do that for you from the way you made it sound.
I've not had a car my whole life.
Wow.
I've the reason I kind of live where I'm at is because I'm like within walking distance of everything. So I've never really
Mhm.
needed a car, but um, if I wanted one, I'd probably have to get it myself at this point, which
Right.
I get, but it's like still, it's like dang, I see who the
Yeah.
favorite is.
Yeah. Things
Yeah,
like that would make it
yeah.
really difficult not to, excuse me, make those comparisons, especially. Um, and so that's been growing up. Have you had any history of substance use?
No.
Okay. No, alcohol usage?
I drink a little bit, but not enough. Like it's maybe once or twice a month when I
Okay.
go out with friends.
Once, twice a month. Have you ever experimented with any recreational drugs?
Mm-mm.
Okay. And then how had did you perform in school growing up?
I did, in spite of my anxiety being crazy bonkers, I did really
Mhm.
well. I think I really only slipped up on like um really, really big tests like the ACT, that kind of thing. But other
Okay.
than that, I did really good.
So academically, it was pretty good. What about behaviorally? Did you have any problems?
I never really acted out. I know growing up a little bit, sometimes I'd kind of be off in my own world and I
Okay.
wouldn't, like my teachers would think I wasn't paying attention, but like they'd call on me and I was. Um, so I guess not like bad behavior, but just like kid stuff, like in La La Land.
Sure, sure. Absolutely. Um, and then how about socially? What was your social dynamic with your peers?
I was kind of anxious with peers, I think, growing
Mhm.
up. Um, I never had that many friends. I always had like one or two really, really close friends. And those have changed over the course of my life. Um, but I've always kind of kept to just one or two people for socializing.
Okay.
Everyone else kind of saw me as the weird kid.
And how did that feel for you?
Bad. I was like, man, just because I like things that are different from you doesn't mean we can't be friends.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And what makes you how were you able to tell that they think of you as the weird kid or that
They
they did?
bullied me for it. For real. They kind of just they would pick on me. They would like kind of mock me like verbally and stuff.
Mhm.
Not over like what I would like sound like, but like what I would talk about all the time. Sometimes they would like I used to draw and sometimes they would take like my drawing journals and pass them around the class and make fun of my art, even though I didn't think it was that bad. Um, just kind of not fun stuff,
Yeah,
mean
that
kid stuff.
that sounds awful. That sounds really awful. I couldn't imagine being in that situation. That's
It's
and how
tough.
old were you when this kind of things happened?
I think that started happening when I was in seventh or eighth grade.
Okay.
Um, and it kind of carried on until I was a sophomore in high school. So for about,
Really?
yeah, it took those kids like um doing bad things and dropping out for it for it to stop. Like I hate to say it
Yeah.
that way, but it was the kids that picked on me were the ones that kind of just dropped out and didn't
Yeah.
come back.
That sounds pretty brutal growing up, especially as young as seventh or eighth grade and for such a prolonged amount of time.
Mm.
But you said that so it was mostly the kids that maybe were sort of troublemakers, maybe, and
Hmm.
ended up dropping out of school. Um, so it was kind of a select group of kids that it tended to
Yeah.
always be.
Hmm.
Um, that still doesn't make it any easier. That's so
Yeah.
difficult,
Yeah.
especially if they're managing to get others involved by passing it around
Hmm.
in school. Um, what feelings did that evoke for you growing up?
Worthlessness, I guess. Like it just, it was embarrassing to have them do stuff like that, you know?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you think you feel similar feelings when you are going through, um, currently in the present day, those bouts of anxiety?
Yeah. Like when I get really anxious like that, I do feel kind of worthless and embarrassed,
Mhm.
which really sucks.
Kinda almost maybe even takes you back to some of those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now are you um, it's very normal for anyone to sometimes, question life, whether or not there's much meaning to it. It's a pretty normal feeling. Have you felt any suicidal ideation, any thoughts, as such?
Yeah. I've kind of struggled with that for most of my life. Probably that started around seventh grade too. I didn't really understand it at the time. But as I've gotten older and I've gone through therapy, I've realized that's not normal. Um, I did attempt once when I was 16, which I didn't talk about for a very long time, but I've
Mhm,
been talking about it, been a little bit more open about it and accepted it for, what it was. It was a very stressful situation. And that's kind of, I thought that was my only way out.
mhm,
Uh, Thankfully it wasn't. But it's been the first and only time I've ever um really attempted, um excuse me. Um and I've kind of sort of had off and on ideation. I've never really had another plan. Even that event was just very unplanned, very spur of the moment kind of
okay.
thing.
So, it was even unplanned and just kinda
Yeah.
took an opportunity as you saw it at the moment. Um, but and so since then, it's been fairly off and on.
Hmm.
Um, how often would you say thoughts like that come up?
They come up a little bit more kind of around winter time, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Like usually throughout the rest of the year, it's maybe like once every 3 months, and then during the winter, it's probably like once or twice every month. Um, just because it's a little bit more gloomy outside, and I'm a little bit
yeah,
more, you know.
absolutely. I mean, seasonal depression's a real thing.
Hmm.
Um, and so you mentioned you haven't really planned anything, any formulation. When's the last time you've had a thought, a suicidal thought?
Mm, Probably July, so 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay. Um, and when you find yourself having these suicidal thoughts, what are the things that are going through your mind? What are you thinking and what are you feeling?
I just feel really overwhelmed, and it's kind of like I just kind of like, if like the way I've described it before, if like life was a road and us living in it was us like driving a car, being in a bus. If I could just get out of the car or the bus, that'd be awesome when I'm really overwhelmed like that, because I just want to like take a breather, and I don't
Mhm.
feel like I can take that breather. So I just kind of, I'm like, this would be fine if I could just not be
Yeah.
here.
And what does that mean to you? So if you were to get off the bus, does that mean you take a break from the trip, you stretch your legs and then catch the next bus that comes through? Or
I don't
is
know. I've never thought of it further than that, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I know that takes a lot of vulnerability and sincerity, and I really appreciate that. I think we'll be able to continue expanding on these anxious symptoms you've been feeling, and be able to try and develop or redevelop some skills to help you manage that throughout going through work and school and even in your social situations. So I'll plan on seeing you next week unless you have any other questions for me.
I don't think so. I think I'm ready to go ahead and get started next week.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week, Artie.
All right. See you next week.
Mm. Oh, my mouse isn't working.